Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Coach Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. We begin our recitation from Rag Gaudi Gwareri, Mahalla Panjwa, Chaupade, Dupade. These are compositions of 4 stanzas, each containing 2 verses. And they begin with a shortened version of the Mool Mantar, so-called, and the recitation follows. Ik oankar Satgur Prasad, jo Paraio Soie Apana, jo taj chodan tis syo man rachana, kaho Gosai miliye kehe, jo birjat tis syo ne rahao. झूठ बात सा सच कर जाती, सत होवन मन लगे न राती, पावे मार्ग टेढ़ा चलना, सीधा छोड़ अपना बुनना, पावे मार्ग टेढ़ा चलना, सीधा छोड़ अपुट्ठा बुनना। दोहां सिरियां का खसम प्रभ सोई, जिस मेले नानक सो मुक्ता होई. The message in this Shabad is a very insightful one, something that we often miss, and that is Doha Siriyan ka Khasam Swami. Doha Siriyan ka Khasam Prab Soi, same difference. Jis mele Nanak so mukta hoi. So the path to liberation is to recognize, to realize that the Master Self owns both ends of existence, which leads us to the point of Ik Oankar, Satgur Prasad, which we have literally translated as oneness, that is realized through the insight of the true enlightener. So Ik Oankar signifies an expansive, all-encompassing reality, which is a seamless whole. We have to remember that. It is a seamless whole, and it has parts that are a continuum. So it simultaneously comprises transcendence, nirgun, and eminence, sargun, although nirgun here means a state that is without attributes, sargun, a state with attributes. Both of these seemingly contradictory states exist simultaneously as a seamless continuum within what we call Ik Oankar, within this universal consciousness. So by that reckoning, it contains infinity and finitude together. It contains unity and diversity together. It is being in the sense of being absolute, and it is also becoming in the sense of forever creating and being creative. And this Ik Oankar is revealed through Satgur Prasadi. Prasad, more often than not, is translated or explained as grace, but we have chosen to translate it to mean insight. Satgur Prasadi, because to our way of looking at things, especially to my way of looking at things, when we talk about grace, we often confuse it with the Christian idea of grace, and it also leads people into believing that if it is all a matter of grace, then we will just wait for grace to happen. And that is not the intent here. So I feel that by using insight instead of grace, it makes matters a little more clear. So this universal consciousness that we call Ikkonkar, this expansive, all-encompassing reality, reveals itself through its own wisdom. So its own wisdom is woven into its texture. So the texture of existence has this immutable wisdom, which is called the Gur, or the Satgur, the enlightener. The enlightener is also within the structure of this consciousness. And it is through this, the insight that it provides us, that we are able to understand the nature of Ikkonkar and therefore be able to establish a relationship with it. That is the header. And the first verse follows, So Paraio Soie Apana, Jo taj chodan tisasyo man rachna. So instead of abandoning what is illusory, Jo Paraio means foreign, not belonging to oneself, but here the meaning is illusion, what doesn't really exist. Or when Gurbani says what doesn't really exist, it means what is fleeting, transitory, impermanent. So what Guruji is saying is that if instead of abandoning that which is illusory, and we know what that means, it is referring to the world we are in, the world of the senses. What has happened is that the mind, instead of abandoning what is illusory or what is foreign, it clings to it. This is the state of our minds. So the world that we perceive through the senses has no real existence because it is fleeting, but the mind creates its own world out of this fleeting universe. And so it does not last, and so therefore it gives rise to all kinds of unhappiness or afflictions or kleshas as they are called. So the Guru asks the obvious questions. Kaho Gusai miliye kehe, how can we find, or the mind find its own source when jo bibarjat, that which should be abandoned or that which is forbidden, tisasyo ne, one is engrossed or in love with it. So the idea here is that we cling to what we really should be abandoning. In other words, we should not grasp to sensory experiences. This is not to suggest that we shouldn't have these sensory experiences, but we should understand the temporary nature of these experiences. So we should understand that nothing stays still for too long, whether it is happiness, unhappiness, success, failure. These are all transitory things. That is not to say you shouldn't be pursuing success, but if you understand that these are things that are fleeting and not permanent, then one will develop a tendency not to hang on to things. And you see the difference. It's a qualitative difference in the way we live then. Jhoot baat ja sach kar jati, sat hovan man lage na rati. Similar thought. The mind believes in what is transitory. It believes that to be permanent. But not for an instant, the Guru says, does the mind recognize the unchanging truth that is all-pervading. We are only looking at one side of the equation, so to speak. The truth is that in addition to sensory experience, which is based on the world of the senses, matter, maya, there is also the world of the self, which is unchanging. So there is a self behind all this, but that is imperceptible to us. And furthermore, Bhave marg tedda chalana sida chod apana bunana, aputta bunana, The crooked path is pleasing, the assured way is abandoned, and we are weaving backwards. In other words, what we are weaving as our truth, because Gurbani does use this metaphor quite a bit, weaving the cloth of life. Two maidens, day and night, dance in circles, and endlessly does the mind weave the stuff of life. But the mind distorts its reality by weaving the cloth of its existence only in one direction, puttha. Whereas we know that when you weave, you go back and forth, back and forth. That's the idea here, that we are just going in one direction. The crooked path refers to practices that were not considered acceptable, if you will, esoteric practices, also called Vam Marg or Bame. Bame is left-handed practices that were prevalent in India. And in Europe, crooked paths refer to witchcraft. So you see, the point is that Gurmat, the path of Gurmat, the sure way of the Guru, requires an inversion or a movement and direct engagement with the self within. So in the end, it's this realization, Duha siriyan ka khasam prabh soi, jis mele nanak so mukta hoi. So mukta. Who is the mukt, or the free, or the liberated? Jis mele. Mele, one who understands. In this case, mele is to meet. Meeting means to understand, to come in contact with. One in whose mind this realization occurs that Doha Sirya ka khasam prabh soi, the master of both ends. We talked about Nirgun and Sargun being two qualities. Perhaps qualities is not the right term, but the two dimensions of this reality that are seemingly contradictory, but are possessed within that same universal consciousness. That this consciousness contains within it, subsumes within it, seemingly contradictory states of mind. The one who understands this is truly liberated. So the message again is to be fully engaged with both sides, with the world of phenomena. That means you're not running away from the world, but understanding that it is transitory, and at the same time understanding the numenos, so to speak, the light, the knowledge, the wisdom, whose brilliance actually lights up the world for us. It pervades everywhere. So what that means is that we have to be guided internally by that wisdom while we drive our actions outside. Centered within, driven outside. And then you really learn to appreciate the relationship between the inner world and the outer world, because there is a relationship between the two. And the balance between the two is what frees you. So it is not a one-sided thing. It follows that you can't just renounce the world and run to the other side. Even that, the Guru says, would be haume. It's like live and tat. They are not either or choices. You have to remain centered and you have to remain engaged with the world, with the realization that the world I'm engaged in is temporary, is fleeting, that I am making it a better place, leaving it a better place. I'm trying to evolve things forward, but the recognition that it will not last forever, that my existence will not last forever, is really the key to liberation. On that thought, until the next time, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.